We will now have invocation by Pastor James T. Morris of Lane Tabernacle Church, who is also Vice President of the Civil Rights Enforcement Agency. Pastor.
Let us pray. Gracious God, as we gather to commemorate the 46th anniversary of our nation's Fair Housing Act and the 8th annual kickoff, we invoke your presence this day. We thank you for this day, and we pray for all of your children in need of safe, affordable housing. May each of us in this space work to create communities and build places where all your people may enjoy safe, affordable places to call home. We thank you for this day. Be pleased with our gathering. This we ask in your name. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor. Good evening. Welcome to the 8th Annual Civil Rights Enforcement Agency Fair Housing Kickoff. My name is Charles Bryson. I serve as Executive Director. I appreciate you all being here this evening to celebrate with us and HUD as we do several things. First, we celebrate the past and what a glorious past it has been. Second, we talk about the achievements of organizations and individuals right now working hard on fair housing issues. Third, we look forward together to the battles of our future. You see, there are people who still need our assistance day in and day out, who face the challenges of discrimination such as which we may never know. But yet, we cannot allow them from one more day to suffer. And so we are here together, brothers and sisters, arm in arm, hand in hand, to not only talk about, but to be about making sure that fair housing is not only for one, but fair housing is for all. The theme of this year's fair housing, as it is nationwide, is fair housing. It's your right, use it. With it, HUD has laid down a marker to people in all protected classes, both federally and locally. In order to keep your fair housing rights, in order to hold people accountable for discrimination against others, we cannot allow even the most subtle forms of discrimination to go unchecked. Without each of us standing side by side to protect each other, we may see an erosion in our fair housing rights. And any erosion in the fair housing rights of one is an erosion for us all. The work of the Civil Rights Enforcement Agency would not be done except for a dedicated staff. The men and women who answer the phones, listen to the inquiries of possible discrimination, and do the investigations. They are the men and women who work hard each and every day to not only make sure that our fair rights are not being trampled upon, but to educate others, whether they be property owners, managers, developers, to make sure that they know what's wrong is wrong and how to correct it. It is now my privilege and high honor to introduce to you all Erica Parr, who will be the Mistress of Ceremonies. Erica works tirelessly for Clear Channel to make sure that they are out in the community, and she is out in the community understanding what our community is and how Clear Channel can better serve us. With that, I will certainly, my high honor, to introduce Erica Parr. Erica.
Thank you, Charles. Greetings. The weather couldn't stop us, could it? It's a full house today. So thank you so much. Right now, I just want to move the program on. And please welcome the Honorable Francis Slay, as well as County Executive Charlie Dooley for the official welcome and proclamation.
All right, thank you so much. much. I really, really appreciate it, and good evening to everybody. You know, first of all, I just want to thank all of you for being here tonight, but more importantly, I want to thank all of you for what you do day in and day out to help make our city a more accepting, more welcoming city, a city that has more and better opportunities for more people. The challenges are there, the opportunities are there, but without you and the organizations and the people you represent, we couldn't do this. We couldn't do this. This is hard work. This is hard work. There's a lot of pushback. There's a lot of resistance, but it's the leadership that you provide and the support that you provide to organizations like CREA and HUD and other organizations that you represent that really helps us move in the right direction to help make St. Louis a better place for more people. The Civil Rights Enforcement Agency, which we call CREA, is led by Charles Bryson, plays an important role day in and day out in making sure that who you are, where you come from, who you love, the extent of your abilities plays no role in you seeking and securing and becoming or staying employed or even being able to enjoy life like everyone else in our community. It is why we come together to celebrate Fair Housing Month every April and why we recognize the champions of fair housing. Of course, you know, this is not something we do one day a year. This is when we celebrate the things that are being done day in and day out and throughout the year, but we also have to emphasize and make sure we keep reassuring ourselves and others that this is a commitment that we have throughout the year, and to recognize our successes as well. Our partnership with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development is very, very important in the city, and I know we have great partnerships with the regional and the local HUD office. Certainly want to thank Jennifer Tidwell for her leadership and her partnership, James Hurd and Eddie Wartz and others in the local office. We meet on a regular basis. We talk about how we can, you know, maximize our effectiveness and maximize the resources that are here to help benefit the most people in a really good way here in St. Louis. And I'm so glad to see so many HUD officials and HUD employees here with us to celebrate. I want to acknowledge all the good work that you do, and know that I and my team are committed to making sure that we continue to work together and continue to do some good things for our community. And those of you that are here from our own CREA office here tonight, I want to thank you as well. CREA enforces federal laws and city ordinances involving fair housing, equal employment opportunity, and public accommodation for people with disabilities. And you know, sometimes the work you do largely goes unnoticed, but those that benefit by your work know what you do and know how effective you are, and I want to thank you for that. Certainly want to thank Charles Bryson as our director. And I don't see April Ford Griffin, but I do see Ruby Bonner, who was one of our, she's going to be one of our award recipients this evening. I want to thank you for your great leadership in the organization, and the recognition you're getting is much deserved. So thank you. And I want to thank, you know, the other organizations that are getting recognized, Queen of Peace Center and the Center for Women in Transition. All of you do outstanding work in our community, and we want you to know that we recognize it. Thank you, and the entire community is benefited by your work. So I continue to look forward to working with CREA and with the local HUD office and all the partners that are represented here today to continue the work that we have ahead of us. The challenges that we have, and to make St. Louis a better place. So I will now, it's my honor to present a proclamation. So, yeah, Chair. And what I will do here is just, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I am declaring the month of April 2014 is Fair Housing Month in the city of St. Louis. All right? say that it's always good to be with my good friend Charlie Dooley, who works tirelessly as a regional partner on all kinds of issues, including making St. Louis a more inclusive place that celebrates and embraces diversity. He's a great guy and he's a good friend. Charlie.
Let me say good afternoon to all of you. I'm extremely to be here. This is a good thing. He said, well, what's Charlie here? I said, the city of St. Louis Fair Housing. Because they invited me, that's why I'm here. What do you think? Fair housing has no boundaries. It just does not. And it is about access, about treating people the way they need to be treated, how you like to be treated. Fair housing, it's for all of us. You know, the city of St. Louis County do a lot of great things in partnerships. And these are one of the things that I think is really important that speaks to the entire metropolitan area about the city of St. Louis and St. Louis County, where they stand on equal access to housing. It is so, so important, and it defines who we really are. Mayor Slay now talks about the Mosaic Project, about immigration, all the things that make this a great community, but it means nothing if people do not have access to workable communities of value. And I would tell you this, wherever you may live, it ought to be a place of value, period. It needs to be a safe environment, and fair housing means that everybody has access to those activities. And so on behalf of St. Louis County, I'm going to say congratulations to all our awardees. Don't they look marvelous? They really do very nice. They look very nice, and you're doing the best that you can. But I do understand. I can see why you asked me for remarks and not to sing the song. You did an outstanding job, my friend. And to my good friend, Mayor Francis Slade, we do a lot of great things together. I enjoy his company. And no, we are not dating. We just like each other. We just like each other. It's good stuff. But on behalf of St. Louis County, I want to say congratulations to all the awardees. You do just great work. Keep doing the things that you're doing, because this is what makes the St. Louis area a great place to live, to work, and have a great time. On behalf of St. Louis County, congratulations to all of you. Thank you.
So at Clear Channel, I work as Community Affairs Director, so I have to do a lot of community partnerships. So it's always awesome when I see partners like CREA and HUD come together to make a difference in our community. And at this time, I want to welcome Ms. Jennifer Tidwell. She's the newly appointed Regional Administrator for HUD, and she's going to give you a welcome.
Just like to welcome everyone to the Fair Housing Month kickoff for for the Fair Housing Month of 2014. I would like to thank the St. Louis Civil Rights Enforcement Agency and all its commissioners for planning this event and the extraordinary work that you do every day to facilitate fair housing in the region. In addition, I would like to thank the HUD staff in St. Louis, Mr. James Hurd, who is our local field director, and Ed Wards, who is our fair housing director here in the region. Fair housing is not just part of HUD's mission. It is at the core of what we do. This year, the theme of HUD's Fair Housing Month is Fair Housing is Your Right. Use it. Every person, every family deserves the opportunity to obtain the housing of their choice, regardless of their race, color, national origin, sex, disability, religion, or even whether they have children. Fair housing is the law. It is not only the law, it's the way we live. Ultimately, it's about inclusiveness. No matter a person's university degree, their income level, their profession, their family status, everyone deserves the right for a safe, affordable place to live without the fear of discrimination. In the years since the Fair Housing Act of 1968, HUD has engaged in education and outreach efforts to help shape inclusive communities. The place in which we live is at the center of our healthy and thriving communities. Owning a home helps families build wealth, start a new business, and even finance their children's college education. The responsibility of HUD and all their partners is to deliver safe and affordable housing and to increase home ownership. Affirmatively furthering fair housing has the potential to transform communities across Missouri into inclusive places to live, full of opportunities and free of discrimination. Despite the advancements that we've all made here today, we have much more work to do. Over the past 4 years, the investigative efforts of HUD and its state and local partners have helped more than 28,000 individuals who were subjected to housing discrimination and have resulted in more than $69 million in compensation. In fiscal year 2013 alone, HUD's efforts resulted in a historical $50 million compensation for victims of housing discrimination. We have much more work to do. We often think of housing discrimination mostly as racially driven. However, disabled individuals also face significant fair housing challenges. In June 2013, HUD issued new rules to HUD-assisted housing providers on how they can support state and local homestead efforts to increase integrated housing opportunities for individuals with disabilities. HUD is also seeking to improve the existing affirmatively furthering fair housing obligation to achieve better compliance and meaningful outcomes. The department has heard the concerns of state and local governments regarding the current analysis of impediment process. HUD seeks a process that works together with the larger planning efforts of each jurisdiction. The new rule will carry forward into the consolidated plans and the annual action plans. HUD is committed to creating fair and decent housing in inclusive, sustainable communities for all. I want to thank all of you for your relentless dedication and efforts to this mission. Thank you to everyone who has made today's kickoff a success, and I look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tidwell. She mentioned that HUD has helped nearly 30,000 people. And I don't know if you knew this, but CREA was actually started after a race riot in 1950. The mayor created a board that suggested that they have a whole group to do all of this. So that's why we're all here today. Like everyone has been saying, it is fair housing. It's the kickoff for Fair Housing Month. It's your right, use it. At this time, I want to present to you Mr. Ed Warts. He's the Director for Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity at the St. Louis HUD office.
First of all, I'd like to thank Charles Bryson and CREA for the invite today, Mayor Slay and our other executives that are here, James Hurd, our Field Office Director as well, and Ms. Tidwell. I bring greetings from our Deputy Assistant Secretary, Sarah Pratt, who will be in town tomorrow and be a speaker on the EHOC program, as well as our Regional Director, Betty Bottiger, who will be here as well. It was on this day about 46 years ago, about this time of the day, that Martin Luther King was staying at the Lorraine Hotel in Memphis. And as he stepped out on the balcony to speak to some friends below, a shot rang out, and that shot was heard around the world, and King was assassinated. And it's ironic that a man who stood for peaceful marches, nonviolence, died so violently. King often said, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal." That was some 46 years ago, and we're still not there. The famous philosopher W.E.B. Du Bois said in 1903 that the problem of the 20th century is the problem of the color line. And that is still true today. HUD receives some 10 or 12,000 complaints a year. And in years past, the largest portion of those complaints were from folks based on race discrimination. In our most recent study back in 2012, those statistics show that racial discrimination still exists, but it is a more subtle form of discrimination. Disability complaints are now the largest percentage of complaints that we receive. But it's more obvious when someone discriminates against you on the basis of your disability, when they deny you a reasonable accommodation or a reasonable modification. That is a more obvious form of discrimination. But what we're experiencing now is this subtle form of discrimination with a smile. And so if you don't have the knowledge of how someone else outside of your racial group was treated in a certain situation, then you have no idea that you're being discriminated against. And that is what the study showed. Blacks, Hispanics, and Asians, while they may call to see a unit or to see a house, they can do that now. But they are shown a lot fewer choices or ranges of choices than a person who is white. So we still have a lot of work to do in this area. As Ms. Tidwell mentioned, over the last 4 or 5 years or so, HUD has helped some 28,000 folks with discrimination complaints, accounting for some $68 million in terms of monetary settlements. In 2013, we were able to provide monetary settlements in the range of about $50,000 for folks who were discriminated against. And that is a significant accomplishment for us. Under this administration, HUD has been moving forward with a lot of policies that have been on the books for a while and now coming to fruition. We were able to pass a discriminatory effects rule which says that whether or not the discrimination is intentional, if it has a disparate impact on a particular group of people, then HUD has the right to bring forth an action. And so that was a very important rule for us. We have also passed the LGBT rule, prohibiting discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, sexual preference as well. Affirmatively furthering fair housing. That's a big issue for us. And people often ask, what does that mean? Well, affirmatively furthering fair housing, as it was stated in the Fair Housing Act, fair housing was a policy that was supposed to spread throughout the United States and bring about integrated communities that are free from discrimination and that allow opportunities for all folks, regardless of your racial or background, your national or your ethnicity, whether or not you were disabled. And so we put out a draft rule on affirmatively furthering. What that means, for example, if you receive HUD funding, if you take the money, you are supposed to take some very affirmative steps to push forward the policies of the Fair Housing Act. And it's not simply that you don't discriminate in your own program, but it is the obligation to try to remove some of the historical badges of discrimination. And so that is a big requirement for our recipients. And at this point, when we put out the final rule, we're going to give you exactly what you have to do to meet that affirmatively furthering requirement, because I think a lot of folks are confused about that. But it was the whole concept behind the Fair Housing Act, which applies to all HUD programs and all HUD recipients. And so we will continue to work to move this fair housing mission forward. We appreciate our partners like CREA, and agencies like them who handle some 70% of the complaints that HUD receives on a yearly basis. So we don't do this work alone. We appreciate agencies like EHOC and Missouri Commission on Human Rights that get out and do the fair housing testing, that do fair housing enforcement in terms of lending discrimination, and that have brought some $1 million of suits against local banks here. Those efforts will continue, and we need everyone's help to do that. So if you see someone being discriminated against, say something about it. Bring it to someone who can do something about it. Because a lot of the people that we help, we are their final resort. They don't have the financial wherewithal to hire an attorney to deal with these issues, but we are there for them, and we will continue to do so. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of the program.
Now we will have a musical selection from Triology. Thank you, Triology. So now we're at a point in our program where I'm going to introduce our guest speaker. Her name is Dr. Elisa Warren. She's the Executive Director for the Missouri Commission of Human Rights. I do want to say, St. Louis, we got another one because she recently relocated here from mid-Missouri. Hey! So we got to show her around, although she's pretty familiar with the area. So at the Missouri Commission on Human Rights, she builds networks between government, business, and advocacy groups. That's her main focus. She believes that vibrant community partnerships are key to advancing social justice, and Dr. Warren also strives to foster and strengthen those vital connections as a means to broaden fundamental freedoms. Please put your hands together for Dr. Elisa Warren.
All right, what a wonderful band. Thank you so much for that selection. I was hoping that I could sing maybe, and like Will got to sing, but you really wouldn't want me to sing, so I'll pass on that, but that was really very nice. Well, I would like to just first of all say good evening to everyone that is here. I would like to thank the City of St. Louis Civil Rights Enforcement Agency for inviting me here this evening. It's a privilege to be able to speak with you today. I want to congratulate our award winners you'll soon be award winners and getting the distinguished award later tonight, so congratulations on that. All right, well, as we come together this month as a community and as a nation to celebrate the anniversary of the 1968 passage of the Fair Housing Act, it's an important day. The act, as it is intended to enforce fair housing in our country, and the agency, as you've heard from, the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, is celebrating nearly 50 years of protecting fair housing in our country and providing the opportunity for people to live free of discrimination. This is an important law. And it has been in place so long now, almost 50 years, that a lot of people maybe have forgotten what it was like before we had those kind of laws. So I want to talk a little bit about that because we can't take for granted where we are because we have a lot of work to do. But it isn't the case. As with many things, historically, the historical context, there was a struggle, a huge struggle before the passage of the Fair Housing Act. And so before I move forward, I want to pause and look at the genesis of this law and why we celebrate it, and then take a quick look at the Fair Housing Act and how it came into existence. And I know so many of us here are practitioners and understand, but I think it's important that we kind of look at it in its context. As we all know, in 1964, President Lyndon Johnson signed the landmark Civil Rights Act into law. But the Fair Housing Act was meant as a follow-up to that law to extend protections like the employment protections beyond that to fair housing and to further our freedoms in housing. So the Fair Housing Act was strongly supported by Governor Johnson, but yet the Congress failed to pass it the first time. They couldn't muster up the votes to get it through. So if you remember at this time in our history, during the 60s. Now, some of you may not have been around then, so bear with me, but I think some of us were, a few of us. I know I was. The Vietnam War was in full force. The heaviest hit upon that group were young African American and Hispanic infantrymen whose families could not even live where they wanted to live or rent where they wanted to rent. Yet and still, those individuals were fighting for our country and would come home to be rejected for housing opportunities. And it was not at all illegal. They could legally discriminate against these individuals who fought for our countries. Homeowners and landlords could openly refuse to sell or rent to you based upon your race or national origin or for any other reason that is protected today, such as sex, disability, or familial status. So while the country was in the painful midst of the Vietnam War, as Eddie mentioned, we had the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Riots erupted across the land and across the country because of King's death, and President Johnson took it upon himself to use that opportunity, to seize that opportunity to get this bill passed through Congress, and he was able to do that. Congress delivered. So the bill was signed into law on April 11th, so a few days from now in 1968, just 7 days after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. And his vision, President Johnson's vision, lives on today, and it is, you can attest to that by the people that are in this room, because everybody that is in this room and those out in the community that do this work are the faces of fair housing. You can look in the mirror because you are a part of the struggle and a part of the fight. The fact that you are here shows that you are a part of that. But what about our city? What about the city of St. Louis and the history connected to housing here? Let's talk a little bit about that. I want to trace our historical steps if I can, and to kind of paint a picture. I'm going to enlist, and Will, you'll know who I'm talking about because I got to hear him last year at your conference, Dr. Colin Gordon, who talked about his research in his book, Mapping Decline, St. Louis and the Fate of the American City. And I don't know, this is kind of a dubious distinction that St. Louis has in his book, but it's really a good read, and I would recommend that you get it. Dr. Gordon explains why St. Louis is one of the most segregated cities in the United States, and he explains why in his book. And so I'm coming to you to kind of paraphrase some of those things so that we can understand why our city looks the way it does. It's not by mistake, it was by design. He argues that the story of St. Louis is not just because it's just how our neighborhoods just happen to be and that the whites live over here and that blacks live over here, but as I said, it was by design. It just didn't simply happen. Suburbanization and racial clustering were promoted by public and private policies that preyed on racial fears. So how is that possible? This seems really shocking, I guess, from today's standards, but I want to talk to you a little bit about what happened legally. So in 1916, St. Louis saw its very first ordinance that was passed by a substantial majority that barred blacks from buying houses or residing on blocks that were more than 75% inhabited by white homeowners or renters. And the ordinance read a little something like this. I have to pull my mouth up when I read it because it's still shocking to me, but it kind of explains the sign of the times. An ordinance to prevent ill feelings, conflict, and collision between white and colored faces, in the city of St. Louis, in the city blocks occupied by both races, and preserve the public peace and promote general welfare by being reasonably occupied wholly by either white or colored people, thereby promoting the general welfare of white and coloreds respectively. So that means you stay over here on your side and you stay over here on your side, and we don't want to see any of this happening because it's against the law. So it was intentionally that way. The campaign even went so far as to promote this ordinance with postcards that would show row houses at 4300 West Bell Place. That it was like a view of houses in that area with red X's. This is where black families live, with the red X's, and the entire block, and with the postcard reading, an entire block ruined by Negro invasion. Save your homes, vote for segregation. Just an alarmist kind of tactic. So soon after St. Louis passed this ordinance, though, the Supreme Court struck it down and found it to be unconstitutional. But proponents of segregation found another way to make it happen. They were very, very diligent in doing that. They designed restrictive covenants prohibiting blacks from living in particular neighborhoods. So between 1940 and 1950, whites settled in primarily suburban St. Louis counties and in a few tracts surrounding Forest Park and the city's southern reaches. And as the county expanded, as much as 80% of the new housing stock was restricted, racially restricted. So you couldn't even think about even moving into any of these areas. Which this meant that blacks were relegated to fewer housing options in less desirable neighborhoods and overcrowding. So black families settled mostly and exclusively on the north side tracts, and old industrial suburbs on the Illinois side, and scattered outposts like Kinloch and the North St. Louis County. But the Supreme Court stepped in again, and in 1948, the court ruled on Shelley versus Kramer, Yeah, I know. I'm getting the head nod over here. I got the amen corner right here going, yes, this is right. This is true. I need some amen corner over here, too, okay? But the Shelley versus Kramer case, which originated in St. Louis, that said that racial covenants could not be enforced by the courts. But that was not the end of the manipulation in residential color coding. So public officials used zoning requirements that priced most black homeowners and renters out of the market altogether by real estate agents who steered black and white clients to opposite areas. Redlining, loan approval practices. I know you all know what redlining is, but for those who don't, they're loan approval practices that bar banks from investing in areas inhabited or likely to be inhabited by blacks and promoting white flight out of the urban core. So the effect of redlining was that the suburban growth surged and an outpouring of money went out to the counties while it was withholding funds and resources from within our city core. So, unfortunately, some of the programs that were set up to reverse the urban decay actually worsened the problem. And some of the black neighborhoods were actually demolished to make way for highways and middle-class residences. And some of those never even materialized. You know, the promise was that they were going to build, and it never even happened, but people were kicked out and on their own. So black families had to move in masses to public housing facilities like Pruitt-Igoe and Darst Webb, which arguably only worsened the problem of poverty and overcrowding. In the cities where race was evenly dispersed, if a single racial group has a greater level of poverty, so the hit on the larger community is evenly dispersed and absorbed. But when races are pocketed, an increase in the poverty level is with one race, it is a devastating effect on the community. So poverty is inevitably the horrible cousin to crime, to homelessness, to abandoned properties, and to a lack of services. So it looks like this. By the year 2000, the city of St. Louis housed just 13% of the metropolitan area's total population, and 70% of the metropolitan's whites that lived in the tract were in an area that was at least 95% white. So it was still very, very segregated, very polarized. Another example is that in 1940, 80% of the local retail located in the city, 80% was located in the city, but by 1990, it had plummeted to 12% of the retail being actually located in the city proper. So here we are in 2014. So I don't want to give you that gloom and doom, but this is kind of painting a picture. I think many of you already know this, but just looking at it so we kind of see where we came from. We're here now in 2014, and we've lived decades now with the protective shield of the Fair Housing Act. However, no law on paper magically eradicates injustice. A law is simply the will of the people written down, and it is up to us to enforce that law, to manifest the positive changes that are embodied in the spirit of that law. So certainly, there are still violations and violators of this law. In 2012, HUD and civil rights enforcement agencies like the Missouri Commission on Human Rights and CREA and others investigated, and Jennifer spoke to this as well, nearly 30,000 housing discrimination cases nationwide. 30,000. HUD estimates that represents only 1% of the approximately 4 million acts of discrimination each year against current populations protected by the law. So it's only a very small fraction. But you might say, well, that sounds dismal, Elisa. That doesn't sound like we're doing a good job. But I beg to differ. If you can imagine what it would be like without these laws. We have statistics that show that the laws are actually working. That there were 30,000 times nationally last year that a person who suspected that their fair housing rights had been violated had a trusted place to go for answers. They had an opportunity for justice that they previously hadn't had before. Before these laws were enacted, it was just too bad, so sad. There's nothing you can do about it. So it makes an impact. But some of those restrictions that persist could be due to real estate agents that are steering you towards particular neighborhoods where most of the homeowners are of a common race. It could be that you're a person with a disability and you have a service animal, or you've had experiences where you've been refused a rental property once the landlord discovers that you have a disability. Or perhaps you have a greater obstacles in qualifying for a home loan because the bank asserts that you want to buy in a risky neighborhood. Code words, I guess. So these are likely violations of the state and federal law, and they are heinous violations that still occur today regularly. So I'll talk to you in a moment about some examples of what some of the things that my agency has seen. But first, I would like to talk to you about the Fair Housing Act a little bit further and how it has knocked down barriers and therefore opened doors for many. So gone are the days of restrictive covenants banning people from certain races and religion from joining the community, and banks are being watched over more closely now after their predatory lending shenanigans of the past decade, thanks to fair housing advocates like the St. Louis Metropolitan St. Louis Equal Housing Opportunity Commission and the good work that they're doing. Housing professionals such as realtors are a lot better educated now than they were many, many years ago about the law and their role in upholding that law. We see a very small percentage of complaints involving realtor violations currently. So this is significant progress. All of the housing professionals working together to meet their legal and moral responsibilities really are the faces of fair housing. And I love this. I love this banner up here because you could probably morph all of your faces into that and all be up on this banner because it really is all of us. So one reason that I feel certain that we're making positive change brought about by the Fair Housing Act even relates to my own experience and our family's history. As she said, I moved to St. Louis just recently, but our family relocated to Missouri in 1972 from Iowa. And I know, Iowa, right? You didn't know I was from Iowa. Yep, I am. And so not too many people know that. But I was very young when I did. So we moved here then because my mother was recruited as a professor at the University of Missouri to start a new nutrition and dietetics program, and which is still alive and well today. 40 years later, that program is still going great guns. She's retired, but the program's still running. And she'd won awards for excellence in her field, but our family couldn't live in certain neighborhoods in 1972 that had restrictive covenants. The history of restrictive covenants kept us from being able to move in some of the more desirable neighborhoods that really a lot of the other college professors lived in, but they still had laws on the books in their communities, even as recently as 1972, that would restrict us from living in those areas. And there were not restrictive covenants, but realtor associations were also known to threaten other realtors if they would sell a home to a black family in an all-white neighborhood. So there was some of that going on. And so without restrictive covenants, you still had that same chilling effect, if that sort of gamesmanship was going on, and it was. Not so long ago, so I'm not that old, so I'm thinking, wow, this was when I was pretty young. But today, things are changing. Things are better. I'd like to leave you with that because we still have a lot of work to do, but they've improved so greatly. As long as Missouri, but I tell you what, as long as the Missouri lawmakers continually attempt to turn back the hands of the Missouri Human Rights Act, there's still work to do. The laws that I've talked about and that we're celebrating are under attack in our state and other states, all the time. There are people who would like to not see the progress that we've made continue to be made. So every day, HUD, MCHR, CREA, and other agencies provide a forum for fairness for our citizens who are facing discrimination in housing. These are our everyday heroes of fair housing. Most recently, MCHR sought relief for a white mother brave enough to bring her story to our doorsteps. Her son, 23-year-old African-American male, I guess if he's her son, he would be male, wouldn't he? But I don't know, maybe not. When the landlord discovered the race of her son, he threatened, he harassed her terribly. He entered her apartment unannounced, uninvited. He threatened to shoot her. He called him the N-word frequently, and then ultimately evicted her. So this racism cost this, you'll be happy to know it's not on this side of the state, this Independence, Missouri landlord $150,000 in damages. A St. Louis couple, and some of you may have heard of this one. It happened a while back. A couple each with a disability. Both of them used a wheelchair or scooter for mobility. They were awarded $300,000 because the landlord repeatedly removed the ramp that they had installed to access in and out of their domain, trapping them in their home for over 3 weeks. It's just ridiculous. Some of the things that people still do. Another instance is where a landlord broke a lease with a family with children in Farmington, Missouri, not too far from here, and was held accountable for violating the law because he broke their lease. He stated, well, he really decided that he only wanted to rent to older tenants, and that was really just a cover-up for, I don't want any tenants with kids, no people with children here. So as you all are probably well aware, there's still a lot of work to do, There may not be discriminatory covenants or explicitly segregationist ordinances around any longer, but in so many cases in our cities, certainly in St. Louis, there are invisible lines that divide us, lines that we too often choose to stay within those lines. So I challenge all of us to live today outside those lines. Whatever you define as your kind of people, think of yourself as bigger than that. And I know you all probably already do this, but define yourself more broadly as a part of the humankind. And if you are one of those lucky, enlightened people who happen to exercise your right to fair housing, and you live exactly in the residence that you choose to live in, and in the neighborhood of your choice, then I ask you today to help someone else achieve that goal for fair housing. Lift somebody else up. Reach out and help somebody else accomplish what you've already accomplished, because our work here is not done. I ask you to think about our soldiers as they return back from Iraq and Afghanistan, and let's pledge that they won't have that same sort of experience that our soldiers coming back from Vietnam had, but they will be able to live where they choose and can afford, no matter what their disability is, no matter if they have any sort of mental disability or physical, and that they won't face those same obstacles when they come home. So we're in the midst of a civil rights breakthrough in protecting the rights of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender persons nationally. It's coming to the fore. And it's estimated that there are 160,000 adults in Missouri, LGBT adults in the state of Missouri. And we know from HUD's national study that gay and lesbian couples seeking housing are significantly less likely to receive a response from a housing provider than their heterosexual couples or their counterparts. So families with children are also still frequently targeted, maybe a little more under the radar, but they're frequently targeted for discriminatory practices. So these are the faces of fair housing in our state. So I'd like to celebrate Fair Housing Month and do our very best as we advocate for fair housing, as we enforce fair housing laws, as we reach out around our state to others so that everyone would have the right to live free. And also, I think the HUD motto this year is a good one. Fair housing is your right. Use it. Use it. And I appreciate being invited here today. I appreciate having the opportunity to speak to all of you. And happy Fair Housing Month.
Excellent speech. In Dr. Warren's speech, she talked about a lot of the blatant discriminations that happen in fair housing. But earlier when Mr. Wards was talking about the things that are a little bit more inconspicuous. So even today, I'm just so grateful to be here among the people, the everyday heroes that she mentioned, because they're making a difference. So when there's discrimination that's happening and you know if something is wrong, but you don't know what the words are, CREA and HUD help you put the words together so you can make a case. And so this, we're gonna show you a mini documentary now about fair housing. It's called The Faces of Fair Housing.
If one was to paint a picture of fair and equal housing, what would it look like?
What fair housing look like is a nation where people have the wherewithal to live, based on their financial ability to pay where they want to live and their tastes and preferences, not based on their race, their color, their disability, their sexual preference, family members, where their children exist, religion, and national origin. So it's a country that would be free of discrimination.
Unfortunately, that picture of equal opportunity doesn't exist for many reasons. It certainly has never been the case for housing in the St. Louis area. But the Civil Rights Enforcement Agency here has diligently fought to make that picture closer to reality. Here's some background. The Human Rights Agency was created in 1950 following a racial conflict that ensued when then St. Louis Mayor Joseph Darst ordered the desegregation of the Fairgrounds Park swimming pool. In response to the crises, the mayor appointed a council which recommended establishment of the agency. Executive Director Charles Bryson explains what CREA does today when it investigates and finds discrimination exists.
Depending on if they fit one of the federal, state, or local discriminatory causes, then we will either help negotiate a settlement agreement, which is called conciliation, or we'll actually file charges, as we have in several cases, using our resources within our city council's office to assist us.
CREA's work with the Housing and Urban Development and other agencies to increase access to all people and undo patterns of exclusion has made a big difference in the St. Louis region.
70% of the complaints that are received by HUD are investigated by agencies like CREA. And so it's important that we work together. CREA investigates complaints under their local ordinance, and they have some additional prohibitive classes. For example, sexual orientation would exist on the CREA ordinance, but not under the Fair Housing Act itself.
If someone believes they've been discriminated against, we ask them not to make a judgment. We ask them to call us. We then will take that information, have them fill out a form, a simple form saying this is what allegedly happened. We then will do the investigation and the follow-up.
How was Boone Center today? Fine.
Take, for instance, a complaint filed in early 2013 with HUD against the city of St. Peters by this woman, Georgia Conlon, on behalf of her sister, 49-year-old Julie McNames. McNames is a resident of a group home of intellectually disabled adults. She and the three women she lived with were told they could not move into another nearby place because of zoning laws. Here, Conlon tells the story.
A gentleman had bought this building, this house, specifically to renovate for these four girls and to meet their specific needs. And the city originally allowed him the permits, and then just about the time the house was almost finished, they said, you can't use this as a group home. It's too close to another group home. And that was about 800 feet from it, as an eagle flies, from another group home that no one was aware of.
In investigating that complaint, we took a look at the minutes of the meetings in terms of how they discussed this, but this was a really kind of an egregious ordinance on the books for St. Peter's. So it required that, the public comment on any houses that may be coming in as a group home, and it also required that the city approve a variance. The city was unwilling to do that. So we met with them and saying, hey, this is a discriminatory ordinance on its face,
The city of St. Peters violated the law when it adopted and enforced a 2,500-foot spacing requirement on group homes. The lawsuit was settled after St. Peters agreed to pay a total of $80,000 to Julie and the three other women in the home, as well as make changes to its zoning laws. Julie's case spotlighted a surprising change in the type of complaints agencies are seeing now. Race, historically the number one basis for housing complaints, isn't any longer.
Another case that involved disability discrimination in the city of St. Louis involved Patricia Afshar, who lived in a downtown loft apartment. At that same apartment complex, her son lived there in a different apartment. She had wanted to switch apartments with her son because the son's apartment was much closer to elevator and laundry facilities and other amenities, and the landlord and property management company denied that request. My office, under the ordinance, was able to file suit against the landlord and the property management company, which the ordinance allows. And we made allegations under the ordinance as well as the Missouri Human Rights Act for disability discrimination.
According to statistics from 2012, disability is the most common basis of complaints filed with HUD and FHAP agencies, being cited as 49.6% of total complaints. Race is now the second most common basis of complaints, being cited as a basis for 29.4% overall.
One of the major cases here that affected national law was the case of Shelley versus Kramer. Many of these neighborhoods had restrictive covenants, and so, for example, it was an all-white neighborhood. A homeowner there, was not allowed to sell that property to anyone else other than another white individual. And so the case of Shelley versus Kramer came about because African-American couple attempted to buy a house right out on Labadie, which is now an all-black area here in St. Louis. And so that case worked its way all the way to the Supreme Court.
The Civil Rights Act of 1968 prohibits the sale, rental, and financing of housing based on race, religion, national origin, sex, and as amended, handicap and familial status. CREA representatives say many strides have been made since 1968, but admit much still has to be done to totally change the picture of fair housing in St. Louis and in America.
And now we're going to salute our everyday heroes that make a difference when it comes to fair housing and helping more people throughout our city. I first want to introduce Miss Ruby Bonner, who you need to read her bio in here. When she was just 6 years old, she drank from a water fountain that said whites only on top. And her aunt, thankfully it was her aunt, who pulled her by her collar and pulled her and talked some sense into her back then. And she talks about how she got candy and ice cream, but that never really solved the problem, and that's what really ignited the fire for her to do the work that she's doing. She is the former director of CREA, and she was appointed by Mayor Francis Slay. She also was the first African American and woman to serve as a division director for Missouri's Department of Public Safety, general counsel to the St. Louis Board of Education, and as an assistant circuit attorney for the city of St. Louis. She is currently engaged in learning how to be retired and works as an educational consultant and independent contractor, EEO investigator for the federal sector. Please put your hands together for Miss Ruby Bonner.
So much. I am so awed by that mini documentary. I've just thrown away my prepared remarks. First, as always, I have to express my gratefulness to my divine power who makes all things possible for me, got me through the storm, got me here, healthy, reasonably of sound mind. And I'm so grateful. Besides that, I saw a member of my church here, and I felt like maybe I needed to do that, remember to do that. I also am grateful to my family, some of whom have come out to be here with me today, because they are who really sustain me, have supported me through my academic and professional career. But I'm so grateful to have seen some of my colleagues from the Mound City Bar Association. And also, it's so good to see many of my colleagues that I worked with when I was director of CREA. It's been 3 years ago. And so receiving this award has a lot of meaning for me. First of all, it's just good to know that you haven't been forgotten after 3 years. But secondly, because I believe this award symbolizes how good government is really supposed to work. And so I share this award first with my former boss, Mayor Slay, because it was his vision that decided that CREA should have a fair housing component. And the precursor to that happening was to seek passage of an ordinance that was substantially compliant with the Federal Fair Housing Act. So I have to share it with him. I must share this award with the St. Louis local HUD field office, Mr. James Hurd, And Mr. Eddie Warts, whom you have met, and who was a part of that wonderful mini documentary. I hope that you guys will really get that into the community because I think it's great. It's fantastic. There really isn't a whole lot left for me to say. Charles Bryson said in his official letter advising me that I was going to be a recipient to take 3 minutes to talk about my significant accomplishments. Well, one of the most significant accomplishments is this event. We created it 8 years ago. And my Fair Housing Committee, Mr. Warts was a part of that, and CREA's staff. I think Will Jordan at one point was on that committee as well. We intentionally set the bar high because we wanted the award and this kickoff event to be meaningful and purposeful. And we wanted it to also be an event that would give information about rights and responsibilities under the Fair Housing Act. And so our very first recipient was the late attorney Margaret Bush Wilson, who played a part in getting that case, that landmark case that you heard Mr. Warts talk about, and some others Dr. Warren speak of. That was the case that struck down the racial covenants, although the work continues. And so we set the bar high. We wanted this award to be important, and I believe it is, not because it was given to Ruby Bonner, but because, as Ms. Tidwell alluded to, it symbolizes federal, state, and local government coming together for a purpose. And also, you heard from Dr. Warren, the Missouri Commission on Human Rights. You get to have a piece of this as well. You, Cheryl Rose, were so very helpful to me, as a new director. Mr. Bryson, who was actually the liaison to the mayor's office when I came in. And now he is the current director. He gets a piece of this as well. But I don't want to hold you any longer. We've got some more recipients. I just want to say thank you so much to the commission, CREA Commission, to the Fair Housing Committee, and CREA staff also gets a piece. But I get to take it home. Very nice. Denise continues to do a great job. You didn't pick this out.
Denise, who picked up?
Denise Jefferson. See.
Thank you.
He actually picked this? Oh, thank you, Charles.
Congratulations, Ms. Bonner. So, when bringing up the next awardee, it reminds me of a quote that I saw on Instagram. Are you guys on IG? Okay. Anyway, it says, you can chase your dreams, follow your passions, but you can't deny your calling. And I say this for Laura Toledo because she was a mentor first for this organization. She was a volunteer for this organization, and she was president of the board. And now she's executive director for the Center for Women in Transition. So, of course, this is where she needs to be. The Center for Women in Transition provides resources to incarcerated women making positive choices. Utilizing restorative justice practices, the center assures that its clients have safe housing, find meaningful employment, and work towards sobriety and lead stable, crime-free lives. Please put your hands together for our next awardee, Laura Toledo.
Thank you very much. I'm very honored to accept this on behalf of the Center for Women in Transition, and I'm honored to be in the room with so many people that are doing great work in housing in the St. Louis area. And I need to explain a little bit about myself because I was starting as a mentor and a board member, and I was a practicing attorney. And I just fell in love with the mission of this organization. And part of the reason I wanted to take the step to becoming executive director is that I knew the staff well, and I knew that they were executing the mission to the fullest extent. And so I want to thank the staff that's in the room, because you are the reason that I was willing to make that step, and I'm very happy that I did. The mission of the Center for Women in Transition is to assist women that are in the criminal justice system in making a successful transition to their families and communities through practicing and promoting restorative justice. And if you see that, housing is nowhere mentioned in our mission, but housing and employment are so critical that it can't be separated from the mission. And we have been providing housing since 2005. We had a 12-bedroom apartment building that was donated to us in 2005. Then we got a contract with the Department of Corrections, and we provide housing for up to 28 additional women. So we are providing housing for 45 women at a time, approximately. We serve about 150 to 200 women a year. And there are about 350 women who leave incarceration into St. Louis every year. And most of them are at a really high risk of homelessness, and for the very simple reason that they do not have any money. They don't have a job when they come out of prison, and they don't really have the tools that they need to make those steps. So just having a place to stay, to get on your feet, is so important, and we can provide that. It's interesting to hear about the Fair Housing Act, because the issue that really impacts us is a very legal form of discrimination, and that's the discrimination of having a criminal record. Landlords can refuse to rent, and you don't have, employers can refuse a job, criminal records. So we do a lot of education. We try to make people in the community comfortable. We are located in the Carondelet neighborhood, and that neighborhood has been extremely open to us having our facilities there, and the landlords in that neighborhood have been very open to us. And when our women are successful tenants and successful employees, the word spreads. So we do a lot of work with that. That being said, it's an ongoing project. Is everything, you all understand how that. I also wanted to thank my mother, who is in the room, who okay. She told me I was not crazy to make the move from law to executive directorship, so I'm thankful for that. Thank you, everybody. We'll find a perfect place for this in the office.
Congratulations again, Laura. From one Laura to another Laura. Laura Pennington is the executive director of the Queen of Peace Center. She's another one of our everyday heroes who helps eradicate discrimination in housing. At Queen of Peace, she helps offer comprehensive services, including counseling, community support, nursing, psychiatry, and parenting support. Without further ado, please put your hands together for Laura Pennington.
I'm a little bit nervous holding this award, so I'll put this down. And Laura and I are not sisters, although we've gotten several comments tonight that with the dark brown hair and the glasses, we look a lot alike. So on behalf of Queen of Peace Center board, staff, and most importantly, our clients, I am so grateful and humbled to accept this award. It takes a village to provide fair and low-income housing, and that's something that we have learned really well. We are able to accept this award tonight because of the many agencies, the funders, supporters, donors, volunteers, staff who've made this possible. So to name a few of them, to our Queen of Peace Center board, they have spent countless hours in the development, acquisition, rehabilitation of fair and low-income housing. They are one large reason why we are able to even provide this work. To our staff, and you're going to hate me, but I think they represent half of the audience. If you could please stand up. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for your love, your mercy, and compassion for our clients, because it's because of you working in the trenches every day that we can accept this award and that our clients can know what recovery, what stability, what housing looks like on a daily basis. To Connie Newman, our fearless leader of 23 years who retired. She's trying to retire. Connie, if you could just raise your hand. So Connie chartered completely new territory for us and had the vision from a very early point in Queen of Peace Center's history to acquire, to rehabilitate, to provide housing for our clients. And it's because of Connie and our board's vision that this has been made possible. Connie's parting gift to us was 2 permanent supportive housing complexes, and we adopted them gracefully and have tried to represent her well in continuing her vision in our work. Linda Huntsman, our housing manager, you're going to have to raise your hand too, and I know she's going to kill me. So Linda Huntsman oversees our housing department. So we are a processing center for Shelter Plus Care, and she works with such wisdom, grace, the best sense of humor you will ever find on a daily basis, and it is really the calm in the storm, because providing housing is hard, and we make mistakes, and we learn, but that's what's most important. We learn in this process, and Linda has really guided us through that. To my mother, who's here tonight as well, and she's too gonna kill me. And then to our several funders who are in this room, some that are not, who really have made our fair and low-income housing possible. To the Mental Health Board, who's here tonight, to HUD, who's here tonight, to the Missouri Department of Mental Health, to the Department of Human Services within the city of St. Louis. They have instilled, they've believed in us. They have had faith in our leadership and have helped guide us through our process of becoming better housing providers. So thank you for making this possible. So you all have been our village. You have been the village that has helped raise our housing. The faces of fair housing, the reason why we're here, I think are best demonstrated in the stories of our clients. The faces of fair housing are Sherry. She was a young mother of 4 children. She's 5 years in recovery. She went back to school and is now an LPN, and she received Shelter Plus Care in order to live in a home. And happy to say that she now is going to be a homeowner of the same home that she used a rental subsidy for so long to live in, and now she's able to be a homeowner. The Faces of Fair Housing is in Veronica. She's a teacher, a brilliant writer. She came to Queen of Peace Center about 3 years ago, and she's now in long-term recovery. She's now able to make enough income to support her own independent housing and pay fair market rent. So these women are really the reason we can accept this award tonight. We do this work for the many women, children, and families who know the life of poverty, homelessness, discrimination, and addiction all too well. And we will remain committed to our expansion and provision of fair and affordable housing because of them. They deserve the basic human right of housing, and it is because of them that it's because of housing that they are able to achieve sustained and long-term recovery. So we accept this award on their behalf. They are the reason we do this work, and they are the reason we will continue to do this work. So thank you to CREA. Thank you to all of our supporters in this room. We're deeply humbled and grateful, and will continue to move forward fighting the good fight.
Fair housing, it's your right, use it. So many of us in here actually know it's our right and are spreading the words about it. And if you don't know, like I learned so much tonight, I didn't really know all this stuff. So please continue to spread the word, and I'll do my part to help as well. Right now, I'm going to bring back up to the podium Mr. Charles Bryson, Executive Director for CREA.
Yes, we are almost done. There are 3 things I want to do really quickly. First thing is, Dr. Warren, would you come up and accept a token of our esteem? This is not quite as heavy. Round of applause, please, for Dr. Alyssa Warren. To all the recipients, yes, there will be pictures later, so hang around for a minute. Appreciate that. On behalf of the staff, commissioners of the Civil Rights Enforcement Agency of the City of St. Louis, thank you for coming to our 8th Annual Fair Housing Month. We appreciate your support. We appreciate the work that you do. We are certainly glad to see all the awardees here this evening and the incredible work they do. There are 2 people that I want to acknowledge and ask to stand for the work that they have done for years and certainly supported me as an individual and the City of St. Louis as an institution. One is really responsible for making sure that we had what has to be an incredible video, and I'm going to ask Donna Brooks to stand and be recognized. Donna is the head of STL TV, and we would not have gotten that done without her. Donna, thank you so much. The other person, when I acknowledge who this is, will not like me for weeks, but he owes me lunch anyway. James Hurd, please stand. Hold it. No applause. Just wait. James, please stand. I have known James for a good 15 years, at least. I'm not. I'm trying not to. And I can tell you that James sleeps, drinks, eats fair housing, affordable housing, community development, an organization like few people I've ever seen. He has been a force at HUD. He's been a force in this region, and he deserves far more than we ever give him. And he dresses well, though. Finally, thank you all for being here this evening. You will hear more about the Civil Rights Enforcement Agency in the coming days and weeks ahead. We are going to be aggressive about being out in the community. This stuff is no joke, and we don't plan on playing around. We plan to be very active in the community, on the radio, on TV, anywhere we can be. Because the bottom line is, if we don't use it, we will lose it. And all of us in this room and in the general community are responsible for ensuring fair housing continues in the years ahead. Thank you all for coming this evening. I appreciate it. On behalf of Civil Rights Enforcement Agency, be safe. Thank you.